Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast today. This audio podcast is part of the cytometry cyclone. This audio podcast is part of the Rakas and Bombard episode, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Lobostics production. I'm looking at in this audio podcast, and continuing and looking at the importance of interleukin 2, interleukin 50, interleukin 7, interleukin 15, and co-stimulation in in amongst kidney transplantation, human kidney transplantation, renal transplantation. So, investigator Waldman and team Waldman and teams previously in works and investigations and demonstrated that interleukin 15 or IL-15 signaling primarily occurs by a special process in which monocytes and dendritic cells form contacts with T cells. Within this immunological synapse, interleukin 15 or IL-15 signaling occurs in association to the T cells, originating from binding of CD40 to its ligand CD40L. T cell receptor TCR to MHC major histocompatibility complex peptide and CD28 to CD86 or CD86. These early investigations by Waldman and the team surrounding the mechanistics of action of interleukin 15 IL-15 had focused primarily on interleukin 15 receptor alpha or IL-15 receptor IL-15 alpha in the actions of IL-15, and that through some of the investigations and also sort of more recently clinical immunologists and laboratory medicine specialists and pathologists and transplant clinicians and specialists, for example, have acknowledged that interleukin 15 IL-15 has provided sort of meaningful pharmacotherapy in amongst pre-clinical investigations, and wherein pharmacotherapeutic sort of treatments of injected in IL-15 IL-2 interleukin 2 have been approved in amongst clinical drug trials retrospectively, or as part of clinical drug trials retrospectively. So the uncontrolled expression of interleukin 15 or IL-15 unfortunately also carries a sort of a risk or a challenge to organisms, survival of autoreactive T cells, and that can also lead to the development of autoimmune diseases or conditions. So furthermore, interleukin 15 IL-15 initiates the inflammatory factors, tumor necrosis factor alpha or TNF alpha, and interleukin 1 beta, IL-1 beta, including tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF alpha, and interleukin 1 beta, IL-1 beta, and the regulation of cytokine expression. Interleukin 2 is also produced by activated T cells and its synthesis is controlled at the levels of messenger RNA, mRNA transcription and stabilization. So in contrast, there is a multifaceted regulation of interleukin 15 or IL-15 expression in monocytes and dendritic cells. IL-15, interleukin 15, is controlled predominantly post-transcriptionally at the levels of translation and intracellular cytokine trafficking. Co-stimulation thus have been mediated through several molecules, but also but linked to this, two play a crucial or pivotal basis. Firstly, CD28. The CD28 and ligand on T cell interacts with B71, and or B72, also identified or referred to in the literature, amongst literature as CD80 or CD86 on antigen presenting cells. And secondly, CD40 ligand, a CD40 ligand, a CD40L or 40L, also known as CD154, where T cells interact with CD40 on antigen presenting cells. That draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast, as part of a cytometry cyclone. This audio podcast as part of a Rakas and Bombard episode, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Lobostics production.